everyone, Wylock here, welcome back. I'm getting ready to run Out of the Abyss for my group, and it occurred to me, I've never made any Underdark themed tiles, so that's what I did. They're right here, they're modular, as you can see they lock together very sturdily just via these tabs. We debuted this concept back in episode 95 with the cardboard lock, and that's not required viewing, but I still recommend it. I'm going to show you all the steps to make these again in this video, but still good viewing. Here's a quick little sneak peek of what they look like on the table, all put together into a series of small caves. Should be enough tiles here to make any encounter that I'd ever want to. They don't slide around on the table because they lock together. And I used short walls as usual. Of course, you don't have to do that, but I like that because it helps for playability. Thank you, DM Scotty. Alright, let's go deep underground. So first off, if you don't care about the interlocking feature, then for the base of this tile you could simply use foam board or corrugated cardboard, keep it real simple. I'm going the full Monty here, so it's chipboard for me. Graphics medium chipboard, mother's milk. This is that sturdy grayish brownish stuff at the back of a legal pad. You can buy a pack of 25 12x12 sheets on Amazon. There's a link in the video description below. So to recap the approach we took in episode 95 for the interlocking dungeon tiles, begin by cutting two 2.5-inch squares. Set those aside and cut 4 3/4-inch squares. And lastly, cut a single 1-inch square. Use a modest amount of white PVA glue such as Elmer's to attach the 4 small squares to the corners of a big one. Make sure you're not using a weakened school craft version or something like that. You want Elmer's glue all or some other standard white PVA. Then glue the 1-inch square in the middle. Chipboard loves white glue. It takes about 2 minutes to dry. Just keep the pressure on those squares a little bit as it's drying. You'll quickly get the hang of it, knowing exactly the right amount of glue to use. And then complete the sandwich with the other large square. And you've created a slot in each side of the base. This whole assembly is called the tile foundation, and again, you could just cut yourself a square of foam board or a corrugated cardboard or something else that's thick and sturdy if you don't care about this interlocking feature. Cork sheets, available at any crafting store and most big boxes like Walmart or Target. Measure out a strip that's 1 1/4 inch wide, and then along that you measure out 1 1/4 inch increments and cut them out. I guess it's a long way of saying just cut out some 1 1/4 inch squares. Then take some pliers or whatever tool works for you and pick away at the edges. Not much, maybe 2 millimeters or so. This will create a nice irregular looking edge. And then glue them to the foundation. I used white glue here, but eventually I switched to hot glue because it's faster. Either works fine for this step. So this has no walls, and I call it a field tile. Let's talk about how to do walls. Now you might remember way back at episode 28 with the cavern tiles, I simply hot glued the wall on top of a field tile and called it a day. Ultimately, I don't like that because the spaces on the outside of the wall don't look good, and because they imply to the players that something might be there. So, cut 3 2.5-inch squares, set 2 of them aside as before, those are the top and the bottom. The last one, go ahead and just draw out what the middle layer looks like. In other words, a 3/4 inch square in each corner. Okay, now there are only 2 possible configurations for the wall. The wall begins and ends in corners. It can begin and end in adjacent corners or in opposing corners. Let's do the opposing corners first. Draw a wavy line freehand connecting 2 opposing corners, but make sure that you protect 3 of those intersections. Here, I'll circle them. Make sure that your wall doesn't go inside those 3. I'll go ahead and cut along that line. I used my knife, but you could use good scissors here if you want. I eventually did switch to kitchen scissors. So here's what you've got. See that those 3 intersections are still there. Now line this up on the other 2 squares and trace that edge, and cut those out as well. Back to the middle layer, cut out the slots. Don't bother making them perfect, they don't need to be flawless, just freehand them, it'll save time. And again, white glue to attach everything. Here's that middle layer going on. Yep, and then the top layer. Make sure you don't accidentally flip any of these over while you're working. Orientation does matter. And so here's what you've got: slots on the two flat sides and none on the wall. The other possibility is a side wall. This is handled the same as a moment ago, except you must preserve all 4 intersections, not just 3 of them. See here, I've connected 2 adjacent corners. Cut away the excess. Trace it to the top and bottom. Cut those out. Cut out the slots, and assemble as usual. And there we go. So this has slots on 3 sides. Now be smart about your approach here. Assembly line. I cut tons of squares ahead of time all at once and made stockpiles like this. And when you're doing walled tiles, draw out an entire grid of middle layers like you see here. That way you don't have to keep setting your ruler and marking every single 3/4 inch square. No, measure out and mark many at once on a whole sheet like this. I'm not going to do the exact math, but I think this takes about 1/16 as long to pre-draw them this way. Okay, the walls. I used single corrugated cardboard. Cut out a 3/4 inch wide strip with the corrugation going the short way. Longtime viewers, yes, I know, my tiles have always had 1/2 inch walls. This time around, I don't know, I just felt like 3/4 inch looked better, so I went with that. And if you're a person who's really into full walls, well then simply cut this strip to be 2 inches wide instead of 3/4 inch. Squish and collapse the corrugation to weaken it, then kinda dry fit it and bend it and crease a little, just kinda work it into the general shape of your wall. Then a bead of hot glue along that edge, note it's going on top of the foundation, not on the side, and stick on the wall. Very strong connection due to that corrugation. Then with scissors, just chop off the excess wall, but chop off a little more than needed, maybe 1.5 millimeters more. Like you see here, you don't want it to be flush with the foundation. Then fill in all that corrugation with a bead of hot glue. You might have to tease it with the nozzle a bit to spread it out or fill in, but again, after 1 or 2 tiles, you'll get the knack, you'll get the hang of it. It's easy. This next part seems like it should be easy at first, but it isn't. It can become a mess. We're going to texture the cave wall. Here's how I ended up doing it after a lot of experimentation. Inside of the wall, thick bead across the middle of it. Do a first pass with the nozzle, teasing it straight up and down to spread it out. Work your way across. The glue is still pretty hot right now, so you might see it do this. The streaks kind of remelt and reblob together. Okay. Wait 15 seconds, maybe blow on it to expedite the cooling, and then do a second pass with the nozzle. Bottom to up, bottom to up, bottom to up, as opposed to back and forth. And there you get a nice streaky cave wall. On the outside, put a thick bead down on the foundation, and another thick bead down the middle of the wall proper. Do a first pass, bottom up, not back and forth. What this will do is sort of tie the beads together and disguise the border between the wall and the foundation. And again, if needed, let it cool a little and do a second pass to refine those streaks. There we go, that's looking good. Here's a batch all built and ready to be base coated. We're about to go paint these, but real quick, some reminders. If you dig this video, please give me a like, subscribe, bell reminder, etc., etc. There is a link in the description below for my Amazon storefront. Easy, free way to support the channel if you want. Just buy your stuff through that link. And for all you 3D printers out there, Wylock's Crafting Vids is sponsored by Heroes Horde, which has an excellent range of high-quality models, including but not limited to all True Tiles lines, which are OpenLock compatible. Also, check out my modules over on the DMs Guild, and remember, $3 patrons get free copies of all my releases. So, black acrylic craft paint is fine. Dunk your brush in water, then dunk it in the paint, and go aggressively to the cracks between the cork spaces. All this material is very dry and porous, so having a wet brush will do wonders to help the paint flow. Be aggressive, jam it in there, count on losing this brush when all is said and done. And don't skimp on the paint. It might look like full coverage when it's wet, but when it's dry, it isn't, and you don't want to waste time doing a second coat. So revisit the paint palette to reload that black kind of frequently. Now you'll need a dark midnight blue, an aqua, a minty green sort of thing, and an intense pinkish purple. Actually, I just noticed that these two brands both called their paints turquoise, even though they're wildly different. That's funny. Anyway, kitchen sponge. Cut a bit of sponge to work with, and then start with that midnight blue on the tops of the cork spaces. Being fairly aggressive here, not bleeding much onto the palette, going for like 80% coverage. And then brush it onto the walls, against the grain. This is basically a real heavy dry brush. Go against the grain and it'll leave nice black recesses, but you can see here how much the blue actually does show up. Now take that aqua color and nick at the edges of the spaces like this. Not too much paint on the brush, kind of pull it backwards and upwards to get that nice fade. The intent is to simulate glow. Then dry brush the walls with the aqua. You'll want to be a bit lighter here than you were with the dark blue. And also don't hit all the areas, deliberately skip a little bit. This is easier shown than described. See, you can still see black in the recesses, you can still see some dark blue underneath, and then at the high crests of all those ridges is the aqua, because I was much less aggressive with the brush. Now for the mint, pick like 3 or 4 spots along the edges of the cork spaces and nick them. Just a few random small spots, no big deal. And then back to the sponge, but this time we're going to dip and then bleed off a lot of the paint. The more you bleed off, the finer the speckle will be, and we want a very fine speckle here. Start out by pressing very lightly. You can always add more, but you can't take it away. Just hit a few random spots on the wall, both sides. And now we're really starting to get that classic Underdark bioluminescent mold look. Lastly, take your pink purple and do a heavy sponge load, but only hit like 1 or 2 spots. Don't overdo this. In fact, skip it. In retrospect, I kind of wish I hadn't done the purple. Alright, looking good. Real good. But those spaces are just lacking something. Maybe another sponging with the mint would be in order. No, I'm not going to do it. Not going to do it. I repainted my test tile 17 times trying to get this recipe perfect. I decided on this. I'm not going to risk rework. I'm not going to second guess. It's fine. I'm calling it. Good to go. I'm done. Yep. I feel good. Yep, perfect. Love it. Good call. All right, I'm going to go back and redo a very fine, light speckle of the mint on all my cork spaces. Last step is to make the interlocking tabs. So this is just chipboard, and these are rectangles that are 7/8 of an inch wide, 1 1/4 inch long, and then nip the corners with scissors. Just make a ton of these. Here they are in storage. I ended up making 21 corners, 13 side walls, and 11 field tiles. You'll find yourself wishing you had more corners than anything else, followed by field tiles, and lastly side walls. So before we look at a whole dungeon in context, I thought I'd do a close-up demonstration putting these together. We'll fast forward here. This took like 30 seconds in real time or something like that. And you'd do it before your game. Pre-assemble your rooms, put them on a staging table or something like that. So with the tabs, they lock together nicely, and they're very sturdy. Pick it up by one tile, they hold together. Yep. Nice. So if you're worried about tiles shifting around on the table, this is one way to do it. Probably not the easiest, but nonetheless, that's what I went with. And they come apart just as easily. Alright, so here's a series of small caves I put together. We'll get up close and walk on through. Got some cardstock miniatures, some scatter terrain that we'll do in a future episode. Notice one thing I forgot to mention earlier. Some of the squares, and I try to do this one cork square per tile, you break it somehow. Break it in half, break a piece off, break it into thirds. Just makes the floor a little more interesting. You don't have to lock all of them together. You could do just the perimeter or just a few of them. You'll find that it actually holds together very well. One thing I tried to incorporate, which you will be tempted to do, is some sort of neon green to sort of fill out that Underdark look. I just couldn't make it work. It looked too busy, too much. Even the purple might have been too much. I kind of wish I hadn't done that and stuck to blues. So I'm all set to kick off Out of the Abyss. I'm excited. If you liked this particular project, here's 2 more that you should go check out right now. Also, enjoy this community showcase. And don't forget to subscribe and click that bell reminder icon. I am Wylock, thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next time.